Hello, everyone. Welcome to the True Stories in Tech podcast, life changing conversation in the area of technology, business, and belonging. My name is Manish Bhadia. Our company is ThinkAI Consulting, and we are strategic partners for our clients in the area of software development. I'm here today with Brian Inuma, President of Strategic Systems Group, Eddie Bader, CEO at Aegis Innovators, Eric Claus, CEO at Partners Source Solutions. And today in the podcast, our guests are managing partners from Seer Strategic Solutions, Jason Price and Sheila Volante. Jason and Sheila, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. We're really glad to be here.
Excellent. I'm glad that even though with some technical difficulties, we are able to make it happen. And what we want to understand is, Jason, a little bit about your background on how you got started in area of technology, and then how you came to meet Sheila, or how did you form Seer Strategic Solutions. So take us a little back in the history and tell us how you got interested. How did you get started?
Yeah, my waitering gig wasn't working out so well, so I had to try something new. Actually, my wife recommended that I start with a company called Overture in Pasadena in their customer advocacy department.
Yeah.
And before long, I think within the year, they were snapped up by a company called Yahoo. This is back in 2003. And that was IT. And the entire thing was how to ensure that our end customers could understand what this technology was doing for them. And I found that I was really great at translating tech speak to business speak. And that's kind of carried me through several different roles with different Microsoft partners through the years. And now I'm here with Sheila at Seer Strategic Solutions. Glad that she found me.
Yeah, so let's and Sheila, add to this same story. Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. I kind of stumbled into the adoption and change space because as a IT project manager for 15 years, I've did a lot of deployments on large engagements. And the one major factor was that I noticed there was something missing on my last two projects, and that was about the business. They weren't getting it or understanding. And so with my passion about teaching and influencing other project managers in the field of how to streamline projects and making them successful, I was missing the mark on the business side. And so I met Jason Price through Core BTS, and I worked under their practice with him and another colleague. And so they kind of taught me more about the adoption change practices and how to, engage the business to overall, improve project success on delivery. And so that's how Jason Price and us, how we met.
Excellent. And it's funny that, you and me met, like 5 years back in Torrance or
about 8 years ago. Eight when I first started my business, Volante Inc., which was enterprise consulting, for project management optimization.
Excellent. Okay, so Jason, very interesting. Overture, right? So that is before Google monetized. What is that? Click.
Pay-per-click search.
Exactly.
Yep.
Isn't that? Tell us a little bit that story. That I think what I have read is the Overture who mastered that whole concept and then was trying to monetize because it's a new, like you said, right? People didn't even know what is pay-per-click going to do for their business, and then at that time Google did not have any money-making products or services. And it was pretty similar concept, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Overture was one of those Idea Labs companies that was kind of incubated for a time and then eventually moved across the street into the Parsons buildings and built out that, they had monetized pay-per-click for a good long time. And I don't know exactly where the knowledge share occurred. I think it was because both of the owners of Yahoo and the owners of Google, Sergey, they all go back to Stanford together, where they all were PhD students. And I don't know whether or not they graduated, but they certainly had discussions, and Google's algorithms and Yahoo's algorithms were always competing for a while. I think they were like the two dominated search engines for some time. And Google came to focus strictly on search, and Yahoo went in the direction of content, and it was building out, Yahoo Finance and Yahoo Sports and everything, all those different user portals that they have. And it turns out that just focusing on the search experience allowed them to, find areas to branch out into. And when mobile came along, man, they just the Android platform feeding all of that. I think they were better able to manage that space versus what Yahoo was doing for a time. And now Yahoo's part of, I think, the Verizon suite, and Google is the dominant player in that space. I don't have any particular learnings from that, except to say maybe you shouldn't give everybody who's one of your fellow students all your best ideas.
Yeah, I mean, there is also saying, right, like ideas are a dime a dozen, but execution is everything. So then maybe there is some truth on that, is that, everybody heard about it, but then only 2 companies picked up. Maybe that is another thing. And that's what we hear in Silicon Valley about. You can give ideas, but then you talk about this idea, and then like, who is $1 billion company and where is Yahoo nowadays? So,
well, one thing's for sure is that in terms of execution, when I think we're all Microsoft partners here on this call.
Yeah.
And we're all seeing how Microsoft has been brilliant at executing cloud, a space where Google competes with them, where Amazon's competing with them, and it's the dominant player there. And I'm really pleased and thankful that we operate in this space, because there's a lot to offer to our customers and our clients in helping them pull out of the cloud the exact tool or the exact service they need to improve their business. Cloud is the great enabler. So I love seeing that happen in businesses of any size. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I want to add to that. I read an article about the silent giant Microsoft has become in tech industry, where Amazon and then Elon Musk, SpaceX launching rockets to the space, but Microsoft is laser focused on delivering value, impact on cloud, especially for the name brand they have built with the mid-size and the enterprise business. And the article is saying, with the Satya Nadella's leadership, Microsoft has really delivered the value. So that's what you're talking. And I have seen, I'll step back a little bit. When I was in India, Microsoft technology was more perceived as available to everyone, because if you talk about Linux, Unix, or other technology, it was a little complex. It was not for every man's solution, and that's what we lived with. And coming here, we saw some decline in the initial days when cloud was happening, right? Like Google was coming up with the Google Docs and all, and Microsoft was launching BPOS. But then after it became Office 365, it's 2013 or 2014, every month, the trend is upward, and it has become simple and more powerful.
I agree with you 100%. I think of it as the democratization of technology. So Microsoft's been really good about creating simple tools and allowing users to find applications in them. I've been reading a lot of case studies recently online And the idea that all it takes is, I think, one or two people at a given organization or company to get a concept and say to everybody, look, we can all do this. I can show you how. Let me do that. And we can prioritize all of our ideas and figure out which ones will have the best benefit for our entire company, and then just start knocking them off one by one. So the simplification of some of these technologies, power apps, for example, seeing companies build really simple applications on top of the Microsoft Dataverse is so it's exciting, because that it's exciting for people to see that and to hear it in others, because they realize their latent talents, they can unlock those and put them to good use.
I agree. Just to piggyback just a bit about Microsoft, and if we can go back in time and remember the first Windows product and what that was the mecca for, right? We were all excited. I was a little younger back then. However, going away from, the green screens and things of that nature, the overall evolution of the Microsoft product has always been to streamline an organization with the products with word processing, Excel. I don't know any other major product besides Google Sheets. However, it derived from Excel. So Microsoft has been overall the pioneer of streamlining efficiency with the toolbox, right, of tools. And I think it got a better movement since the cloud, since Microsoft 365, right? Since 2014. I think it's going into another evolution, just like the Windows did back in the day.
Got it. So taking a step back for each of you, Jason and Sheila, why strategic consulting? Why this area of focus for you? I mean, how do you connect personally to this, your business?
I'll take a stab at this one. So I love seeing the light bulb go off in people's heads when they are touching like an application or technology, and they're like, hey, wait a minute, I could do this with it. And the ideas start to kind of come out. Now that particular moment is really exciting. It's what I like to do in my my spare time, is volunteer and train people on in the nonprofit sector, having them come up with ideas and see different things, the light bulb going off. That's what I love. And then helping them, guide them from that moment of light bulb to doing something. That's teaching somebody to fish. That's not just handing them a fish every day. And having them then go off and supersede their ideas and create things. That is, I mean, if you think about our purpose on this earth, we're all aiming for that, touching our greatest potential is to influence others. And so giving them the gift of technology and having them go off and do crazy things with it, that is that's my purpose, if it makes sense.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks.
And for me, the part where we can be able to influence a person that is scared to change, to actually be bought into the movement of bidding better, it's all around satisfaction for me. Many times you see folks that are scared about new things that are coming out because it's too complicated, right? Technology is too complicated. I don't understand. Double clicking is horrible. I don't know what it means, how to do that, Yeah. And to take them from that uncomfortable place and making them transition to a comfortable place and space where they feel like they're not alone in this technology, transformation, because to the fact that people they're scared to change. A lot of folks in the business side, they don't want to, do this they want to keep on doing this process because it feels comfortable to them. And when there's an initiative that says you have to do it this way now because you're going to a better, more productive way, you get a lot of resistance. So in this case, our firm helps bring that flourishing to the business, helping push the digital transformation of the roadmap for the organization. And I think that light bulb where a person from a double click can actually click and explore and understand more, that means that in a sense that we've done what we needed to do there to get them going.
Isn't it great when you can find those people that will say to you, you know what, I don't believe in what you're telling me right now. Here's kind of where I stand.
Yeah.
I love that because A, they're being honest, and B, I see the greatest potential in them. And they're always the ones that, when I run a workshop and they identify themselves that way at the beginning, let me come back to you at the very end of things, check back in to see where you are, because you can act by showing somebody of that nature and what's possible for them and helping them get to the other side. They can turn into your greatest advocates. And they're the ones then that can informally influence others throughout the organization. So they're diamonds in the rough, those people.
Right. One more question before I hand over is, this is the new push from Microsoft about use of technology by citizen developers, those who don't know how to code but are technology averse and are able to do things without coding. So when you talk, is your target more on the citizen developers or you are doing combination? What is your best partner on the client side?
I think it's a combination of giving them the visualization to do it, where they don't have to wait. Giving them the tools, as Jason mentioned, giving them the tools to fish, right? To make something better. Because as we know, in your own sales, if you can make something faster, greater, better, and you have the tools to do so, you're might try to do it, right? And I think that going in this new direction of the citizens developers is giving them the opportunity to stay innovative. And the reason why I say stay innovative, because as we know, a company that is not innovative will be left behind in the dust one day, right? We've seen it. Sears, Blockbuster, you name
Yahoo.
it. So Yahoo, right? So if you give these groups those tools to kind of, work it out without knowing the back end knowledge of coding, you might find out that your business can, flourish a little bit more in those diamond in the rough areas.
So if I can chime in, I have a question around that though. Where do you see the role for traditional IT along with the citizen developer low code type of world? Because there's an intersection between those two, and I'm curious where you find that.
I find that a bridge is finally being made between business and IT, and that they can be able to essentially get to a point where they can speak a similar language. Maybe it might be basic business and basic IT, but at least they have a common ground and where they can be able to innovate together. As we know, a citizen developer can only do so much, right? Where they can at least bring the requirements to the IT where they can meet together. And then IT groups can be able to do additional complexity like bots and things of that nature that might help, fulfill that roadmap for that business end user.
And what about, where does security come to play in this? Because of course, we live in a world today where security is incredibly important. The citizen developers don't understand that threat matrix that's out there. Is that also a place where traditional IT comes in?
Absolutely. We can finally get governance requirements at the table instead of IT influencing governance from what their perspective is, because they may not know it's bogging down a business practice with so much security. We find this a lot in pharmaceutical firms, that, you have so much of the legal thought process about, security, where it doesn't really traditionally need to be so. So in this case, I highly recommend that IT security also need to be in those conversations with business to understand a commonality and a ground. And the last thing, I think it's education. I think that the IT, in a sense, responsibility should be to inform and educate their business users on these new sets of tools, and not to be afraid, not to come to the table because they're scared that they're going to break something, but to also to bring them fruition of knowledge that can be, very beneficial for the organization.
It's interesting that you bring up this question, Eric, because I think that everybody's roles are shifting. There's this huge push for reskilling as these new technologies are coming down the pipeline, that that the old roles and thinking are conflicting with those, and opportunity lies off in this direction. So it's like a little bit of everybody's kind of taking on a little bit of role shift here, that your help desk is not just break fix anymore. They're support, they are guidance, they're a little bit of how-to. Your DevOps is almost involved in the governance of everything. They're the ones that they have to make sure everything is wrapped with the security, wrapped with the compliance, that because citizen developers don't think about privacy. So you have that those new responsibilities now pushed off. And the manager, the frontline manager, has new responsibilities relative to this too. So it's like the impact of the technology is changing the processes by which these the entire business units and everybody under there operates under, and there's like rippling impact, I think, across those roles and responsibilities as a result. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think, there's another side to this also. I'm curious, we talked about it kind of from the developer view to the IT world. How should IT be embracing this? Because that's the other side, right? Historically, IT is very sort of, we're going to control everything. We're going to squeeze it right into this. We're going to fit it right into this little mold here, and everything has to fit our mold. And they are absolutely paranoid about the concept of the citizen developer, because now all of a sudden, how do I control that, right? In their head, I got to control it. So how do I control it? So where do you see that?
Right. I think for years, IT pushed out products and spent so much money on things that went to waste, that were not utilized. And you're right. Where does IT lie? It's basically a true partnership with IT and business. If they want to buy the right product and the right solution, they have to bring the business together. And the IT can be able to enforce certain things. I think that goes back to education, again, of what is currently today, what can we do from a security perspective? In business, what are you guys doing today? How we can come to a common ground to be able to influence the next generation of product and or service within their ecosystem. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian, you've been pretty quiet here. What do you got? Brian's usually got some good questions.
I was letting you guys play your cards. You're doing a fine job. Okay, can I go back a little ways? One of the things that I had noted, even in our first discussion, Jason and I probably are about the same age. So I turned age 63 last year. I do have a WeWork subscription to the location in Long Beach. And as I walk through that place, clearly, I am the oldest one there. Mm-hmm. Many of them are late 20s, early 30s. A few of them a little bit older, in their 40s, but relatively rare. What I find fascinating is the dichotomy between the baby boomer generation, which I'm at the tail end, and the millennials. And what I'll mention is that my observations about the folks in that WeWork location, they don't, and I hate to stereotype, but they don't fit the stereotype of millennial. They're all pretty energetic. They all have goals in mind. Some of them are entrepreneurs. Some of them are working for large organizations. They're very bright, motivated people, and not typical of the millennial stereotype. Okay, what I notice about the two of you is that there's a bit of an age difference. So do you have some sense for transfer of knowledge or different ways of looking at things, perspectives? How does that work?
I'm going to answer that starting because I learned so much from Jason Price. And he aids and guides and assists. You have to have an open mind. Yes, I am a millennial. I think I'm in that millennial category. However, I did evolve with technology too. So I do have some understanding of some rough times of that. However, he listens to my ideas. They might be crazy, but he listens. And he also has ideas from experience too. And I think that what works for the best of for us is that we may not implement everything. However, allowing the table to be fluid and not, hold your emotions at the table and try it. Let it fail. If it runs its course and fail, that's okay. We learn. And that also goes to the Gen X and the new baby boomers, I think that they're called, right? Allowing them to fail to build success. And for it not to be so much of, I've done this for 30 years and this is the best way that it goes. But to actually allow the new generation to fall and not criticize them for falling. I think that that's where the disparity lies in organizations. That, the trump card is 30 years. And this, kid that's coming out of DeVry 2 years after that's solutionizing things that you've never seen before, but they're not given the opportunity to be at the table. What works between Jason and I, that he listens and he, even though he may not agree, let's try it, right? Having that openness is been amazing when we work together.
Brian, it's funny that you see me as a peer, although I'm 10 years your junior. I think it's all this gray hair in my beard. That's probably it. I got to tell you, one of the hardest things the hardest challenges I have in my daily life is trying to communicate with my 13-year-old daughters. They speak a different language. They're very visual. They consume so much video that that things have to be presented to them visually. So often what I find myself in the habit of is I will say things the way I understand it, and then I see that they don't get what the heck I'm talking about. And then I have to kind of find a different way to communicate that, or try a different analogy or something else that gets it across. And trying to listen to them is always a challenge. So I think the key point of what you're pointing out there is Gen X, millennials, they're nobody's going to fit. Your stereotypes are not always going to apply, and we're glad about that because we want to talk to people as human beings and as peers as much as possible. But the idea of communicating means that if there's a feedback loop. If I send a message over and I don't get back from that person that message is received and understood and acknowledged, then I've got to kind of find a different way to give that over so they can then acknowledge that they've received it in the fashion that's palatable to them. I don't know if we just went off on a way tangent, but it's the gray.
And I apologize. I didn't mean to make you older than you are. Okay. One more sort of interesting dichotomy between the two of you. If I read correctly, I think Jason has an arts background, maybe liberal arts. Okay. Sheila, by contrast, has a very business focus. And if I also read correctly, it's Dr. Volante, isn't it?
Almost. A few years to go, but yes, I am a doctor scholar.
Good for you.
Thank you.
How does that work? That's a pretty big dichotomy between the two of you. How do you reconcile that?
Good question.
I'm going to have to tell you, Sheila, as kind as you were saying that I listen to you, I know you listen to me. And sometimes we don't agree on a particular principle, but then we can kind of make our cases, and we're coming from different backgrounds. So a lot of the time I rely on your vision and your knowledge of business that you've garnered over so many years. And I'm like, you know what? I just have to trust in that Sheila is leading us in the right direction. I will defer. And I know in a lot of cases, you do the same for me when I say, believe me, this is the presentation that will work the right way. You will trust me in that sphere. So we have like our different areas, and where they collide, we have learned to be malleable and understand each other.
Yes, this is correct. I have nothing to add on that. He's dead on.
Cool. A question that Manish and I have bumped into at various points in time. In one of our cohorts may have mentioned to Manish a discussion about whether or not an MBA was useful. And I have one, so I went to UCLA for graduate school. And I think Manish and I had some conversations about yes, it was useful, or no, it wasn't useful. Okay, so how about Sheila? Was the MBA useful?
The MBA for me and how I utilized it was useful. I think that the first thing from an MBA perspective is always that marketing, right, of what school you went to, right? If you went to UCLA or USC or Stanford, they're going to look at that. However, the experience that you engaged in those studies and how you apply it to your industry, it really was shine colors. Not saying that anyone who doesn't have an MBA can't do the same thing. However, practicality, what I learned from Keller Graduate School of Management was real life experiences that I mirrored with my experience coming out the gate. The same would go for the doctorate's degree as well, where I can be able to defend from experience and theory and things of that nature, and hopefully to apply what I learned from the doctor's degree into the real life fashion of the real world.
Cool. All right, very good. Let me delve into some questions that went back and forth in email, so I don't want to let those go. In communication with Jason, he refers to the perceived threat of new technologies and sources of employee resistance. Okay, so what does that mean?
That goes back to that fear that Sheila was mentioning. So the fear of the unknown, technology represents a whole lot of that. And I think part of that is because we've been spoon-fed so much garbage by Hollywood that says technology is going to turn on you one day and pull you down and ensure that nobody can find your body. But it's because people don't understand the ones and zeros below everything, and they think that that's where everything is wired to go the wrong way, instead of understanding how technology can be practically applied to a challenge, to a situation, to a business problem, and seeing how it will work the way that you write it or create it to work, and it'll run that way as intended. It's great to have like the idea of a robot serving you in your house, but you'll always be in the back of your head wondering, when is it going to knife me in the night? Which is silly, because I just think we have so much to surmount because of the way things have been written and presented to everybody. And there's, because if a robot does everything perfectly for you in your household, there's no movie. there's no conflict to be occurred, and it'd be pretty boring to watch. But that's what happens. Your Roomba, sweeps everything up for you every day. It doesn't come in like eat your dog. So I think we need to find more examples of those, which is why those stories that come out of those success cases can illustrate the real life application of these technologies to challenges that help so many people, that save thousands upon thousands of pages of paper and free people from the menial tasks that they have to do today to reinvest their time where their true talents are best served.
So maybe if I can ask a question here, around the new technology and that what you're talking about really is an envisioning process, looking at, a current state, trying to get to a future state. I recently had the opportunity to go through something that Microsoft calls Catalyst, which is an envisioning process that they have. But I'm curious, for you, is there a process that you work through with clients when they're trying to go through that effort? And are there some ground rules, or are there some things that you put in place around those to try and get the best ideas out of people? Because we know, for example, if we stick the CEO in the room and he comes out and he says, well, here's what I think, everybody is going to go and they're going to say, yeah, what he said. That's what we should do, right? You very rarely will get somebody to stand up in a room and say, I disagree with the CEO. So I'm curious, is there a methodology? Is there a process that you go through? And how do you kind of guardrail that to try and capture those maybe oddball ideas that are out in left field that are genius, but nobody's going to say them unless they feel like they're in a safe place, right? In a comfort zone where I can express that idea.
Absolutely. So the framework that is used is, we announce this is a safe space and let's get your ideas down. And Eric, it works like magic. In the beginning, it gets a little bit slow. However, people start to turn their wheels and they start to write down their wants, desires, or inventions or ideas, right? However, it's like if we go on the track you want to here in Las Vegas, and you want to go ahead and ride that, Bugatti across speed Las Vegas, you got the experience. However, you may not go home with that Bugatti at the end of the day. However, if they have the opportunity to put these things and these ideas on paper and be able to elaborate, they may not get it today, they might get it tomorrow. But the most important point is that they have the opportunity to be in a space without any bias, right? And they have the opportunity to express themselves either negative or positively in order to better out the business. Influentials of CEOs, it's also deemed on the culture, right? The culture that the business has. If the business is a culture where no one can speak their mind or have ideas, it's going to be a company that may not be here for too much longer. And that the inviting part of the methodology that we use is that we use the art of the possible. Let us know, tell us what kind of artifacts that you want to see, what you think is not working, and bring them to that workshop together.
And to go back deeper into your question, Eric, yes, there are many guardrails in this envisioning process. So the CEO does not belong in that room. The highest you should be going is line of business. For that very fact that if the top level speaks, then everybody jumps to that instead of putting their own ideas up. Second rule is that ideally you want groups of 3. The reason you don't want 2 people is because there's not enough ideas that surface. The reason you don't want 4 is because then the most senior or the most influential person starts to dominate the conversation. So 3 people is ideal, and having them contribute a list of all their challenges in that first stage, then going into the art of the possible, catalyst, envisioning, whatever you want to call it, that sandbox to see what's capable. Then coming out and having everybody lay down their ideas, preferably in a spreadsheet, so that everything is very minute and all the same, and it stands up to the test, so that it's not dominated or influenced by your decision makers. The idea is for everybody who understands what the front line is dealing with, understands what the operations are wrestling with, can come up with those ideas, prioritize them, and then that can be presented through the process of governance up to then your C-suite, who can validate, say yes, proceed, and then you can begin tackling your initiatives based on timing, budget, and all your other considerations. So guardrails are really important for that process.
Jason, you touched on something important there, and that is a ranking element in there, an evaluation. How do you go about doing that, right? So now we've collected all these ideas. We've got 1,000 Post-it notes. Everybody's contributed their 2 cents. But now, how do we evaluate out of that? It doesn't matter whether it's 1,000, 100, 10. It doesn't matter. Where's the good one, right? Where's the good one or two? Because we can't execute everything. So how do you cherry pick out of that to come up with the right one?
Yeah, I think you have to measure at least on 2 axes. The first one being, what's the benefit or the impact to the organization? High, medium, low in that. And then the second axis is the difficulty of implementing this. Oh my God, that one you picked, we're going to have to pair you up with somebody in DevOps to figure that one out. That's going in the high complexity area. High, medium, low there. Low meaning, oh, Mr. and or Mrs. Democratic or citizen developer, come on and tackle it yourself. So those are at least the 2 considerations you have to put into it, and then you can essentially create a quadrant matrix off of that. I've seen them like 3 by 3. I've seen them 4 by 4. I think they just get unwieldy at that point, because what separates one from the other becomes kind of gray. I like making it simple. Make it simple for business to prioritize this, and then again, it's like that's everybody else's consideration. Then provide that to your steering committee or your governance body, and have them ratify those priorities, and then start sinking their teeth into the top level projects that have the greatest benefit.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. You have something else in the email message to me that talks a little bit about the impacts of system/process reengineering. And we kind of know this from some of our work where the business processes have been done a certain way. The system has a certain methodology to approach things, and sometimes they're just no fit. Is that what you're trying to get at here?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that you can kind of kick around in terms of this topic. One is the systems thinking has to always be in the back of your head. Like, what is the impact of us changing this one thing here? Does it affect anything else? And because a lot of those changes, sometimes the actual impacts to the people, to the organization, we always think about the process. Cool, that's taken care of. But the impacts to the people, what are those? And what are which comes back again to that topic of what are the threats of this new technology? Is this tool going to replace me? Is this there's so many different emotional considerations that go on with that. So the people system is often the last one considered, and it should be the first one. Think about it if you go to a restaurant and you're handed, here's our static menu. You got 50 to 100 different choices that you have on there. Okay, now you have to figure out, here's your appetizer, here's my main course, drinks, and dessert. But what if you knew the chef and you were able to go into a back room and the chef had prepared a menu for you that had your appetizer, your main course, the wine you were pairing it with, and your dessert, all based on what they know of you. Now you have a completely different attitude towards that menu, and I guarantee your dinner is going to taste 10 times better.
Okay, very good. I have bumped into this, and Eric has, I'm sure, as well, the notion of user adoption. I think Sheila touched on it before, where we end up putting things in place, and for whatever reason, people will say one of two things, that this is the way that we've always done it, and this is too hard. I'm not going to get this. Okay, so have I touched on the two things that seem to be common?
You definitely touched on it. I mean, going back before myself as an adoption consultant, understanding this space as an IT project manager, this is what we used to always get. I don't understand. What are we doing? Why are we changing this? What happened to my old product? Can I get to my old product? Why didn't anyone tell me about this? How long have we known this? These are the common questions that you'll hear when something new, they saw the email, right? That the change is going to be in about an hour or two that affects their lives. But the fail on the project team was not preparing them for this major change. Just to piggyback on what Jason said about the people and the impact that it has. And that I don't think that IT project groups really do a service to the people when this change is done. Now, I want to kind of go back to what you said about adoption and change management. IT has that framework when they put a change order in for a new firewall change, right? They have a change management group when you have to put in certain type of policies for this to do that, et cetera. And they kind of think about, in that perspective, about the impact of the people too. But that same energy is not applied into projects and into institutionalizing that adoption and change practice of the people and giving them the opportunity to digest the changes that are going to happen in their sector. And I think that the momentum of project management being successful in the future should implement adoption and change consultants, just as if they'll still need as a dependency, right? Like they need security as a dependency, as they need developers as a dependency to make them work. They also should add in the equation those change consultants to help deliver and drive that change.
Your other comment was about levels of internal adoption support.
Right.
So what did you mean by that?
Yes. So by that, you do have what's called white glove, which is usually your C-suiters, right? That needs a little bit more TLC. And that that C-suite is defined their the way that they're thinking, the way that they're doing business is different than a line of business in a sense. So essentially, the influence on improving their change in the beginning really does help also champion movement or change. Usually technologists or project managers like to do the white glove last, right? Like after all the changes are done, let's do them last. It's going to have less impact to their day. However, having a small group of beta testers in the C-suite space would be ideal, right? To have them go through a necessary pain so they can be able to influence their team when things come around or give feedback, right? On how it might impact going down the line. So the audiences of change does go by role, also goes by, criticality of an operation department, and that those champions of change or those change agents should be able to acknowledge those areas as they're implementing those solutions.
This is something that Eric and I have talked about at various times. And Eric tends to focus on CRM, Dynamics Customer Engagement. I tend to focus on ERP, Business Central, for example. In these two cases, ERP and CRM, do you see some commonality? Do you see some differences in approach? Do you look at them the same way?
Oh, I don't look at them the same way, but they're both beneficial and they're both useful, right? One can't live without the other, essentially, right? And it's just a full loop in my perspective about the two products. I think for the both, I think the commonality that has to be is the communication, and that also includes the technology of the processing, right? Make sure the customer is good, make sure the line workers are talking back to the customer, et cetera, et cetera. So those two products must go hand in hand and they cannot delay.
And I think there's another facet, the way that those two are similar in that there's constant work to continually improve both of them. Sales is always going to want better results out of its CRM, and operations is going to want better results out of its ERP. So built into the framework of refining and supporting that product, you have to make sure that the layers of support, those change agents, the champions, as well as your governance and steering committee are committed to the long term. This is not just like, oh, I'm going to, pull it out of the bag, jigger it a little bit and hand it over and say, see you later. Like, everybody has their role. Help desk has to be up on top of everything. And so that everybody knows that this is an organizational initiative and that we sink or swim together for the long term.
And to kind of chime in around that, I'm curious what you see, because frequently, whether on the ERP side, the decisions for ERP are made, in the finance side of the house with the CFO. On the CRM side, they're made at the VP of sales, VP of marketing, chief revenue officer, whatever title you might see. But I'm curious what you see around that, going back to the user adoption side, because at the end of the day, it's great for the CFO to want great reporting, for the VP of sales to want, great analytics, but you don't get any of that without those line of business users adopting the system, using it correctly, and embracing that technology, right?
Yes, absolutely. And as you see me probably shaking my head like, yes, that's so important that data has to drive up, right? And so it's the reason I go back with the importance of data integrity and understand what you're doing with the data. I think that conceptual is lost, right? As a functional worker, only thing you're doing is just doing this, type it into a system, possibly, right? Like a line work. If they understood the value of their position in the organization and what that report goes to and what it does, it goes back again to education, right? If they understood what that meant, what that line of KPI meant, and how it influenced over to the top of the chain, that definitely will change their narrative of how they're functionally working in their job. Going back to going to my hat as a PM, I used to get statements of work that I didn't understand how did the statement of work come to floor? How did that sale actually go through? And we're supposed to do this in this amount of time. There was no communication. It was just, this is our objectives and this is what you need to do. And I think that friction, in a sense, right? When business, I know I'm going around here, but when business reports do not meet the expectations of operations and vice versa, there's a communication gap. And going back to the adoption change and allowing the technologies to speak communicatively together to be able to interpret a report, from if it's a demand from a CFO to the need from a line worker, that those two reporting systems should be coherent for each other.
I know that these ERPs are built to provide, your CFO, their dashboard that they need to see. But how often are these things engineered from the user side? User-centric design to incorporate the needs of the person on the front line or, in the sales process. How often are we accommodating their needs in putting these tools in front of them and then asking them to reframe their work around that instead of it being built to serve them? The user needs to be represented in this process. And whether you pull them in to train them at the very last minute and have them shake their heads, or whether you pull them into the beginning of this process and have their input all along and have them then reiterating out to the people they represent, hey, I was just in this meeting. I made sure that we put these items forward, that I'm representing you and what you need of this tool. Now you've changed the way that everybody's going to approach that tool on launch day. Do you agree?
Jason, to that end, Jason, I wanted to get your perspective. One of the things Brian and I sometimes talk about is, when you're implementing a new technology solution, there's two ways that you can get the adoption, right? There's the carrot and the stick, right? And I see so many organizations default to the stick, right? It's, you must do this, you must do it this way, and if you don't, we're going to beat you with the stick, right? Instead of the carrot approach, which is build a system that the users embrace because it gives them value, and you won't have that adoption issue.
Fully agree. Yep. It's the difference between having the end user be central to that design is going to save that little bit of time, that fraction every day that matters to them. It's going to improve their experience and their engagement with their work that much more, which translates to greater engagement with the company and their role as a whole, which makes them more productive, studies show. So by doing a little bit of homework at the beginning on what the end user needs and building it around that, you're setting yourself up for the right outcomes of that adoption. And I mean, do you think Mercedes puts out a car without intense focus groups involving people and putting them behind the wheels and asking them, what do you want on your dashboard and what devices do you use and what how do you get your music? Is it from Spotify? Like, they know these things backwards and forwards. And in the software world, are we as diligent in understanding what the user needs out of these tools? We have to answer that question because we're the partner, and we need to better represent users in that process and not always kowtow to the CFO.
I think that my advice to partners is to capture the KPIs of people. Engage instead of the end of the project and capture, how did you like your experience? Capture it from beginning to end and watch it go. Just as if we do for other pilot groups and things of that nature, we look at that to make a decision. The decision of engaging people and actually engaging the next step should come from them and their voice of the customer. And that, I think, it should be implemented more into practice than it has been in the past.
And the third part is the obverse of what I said before, which is ensure that you have enough time in your plan after launch, because it's not all done on day one. Everybody does not figure out every doohickey on their Mercedes dashboard on day one. No. Make sure the manual is there. Make sure the FAQs are built. Make sure that they're constantly monitored and added to. Ensure that there's plenty of time for reiteration upon what works, and maybe looking at removal of things that don't. That it's an ongoing process to refine and get the exact formula right. That if you trust the chef in the kitchen, that he prepared that menu for you, then you're certain to have that best wine dinner possible.
With no A1 sauce. Trust the process.
That spoils the whole thing.
I get it, and I giggle because Maybe it's not A1 sauce, but I often put barbecue sauce on things that I probably shouldn't put on.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah.
Is there an element somewhere in here also of change management for the organization too? How do you embrace, it's always great if we can get 100%, right? But the reality is that there are frequently people in the organization who, I've been doing it this way for 20 years and I don't want it changed.
Yes. I actually we had a client that did not want change management at all, right? And did not believe in change management at all until they experience a proper movement of how change management can affect a positive impact of that environment. At times, it can just take one influential department to make a change. And it becomes, I call it the good plague in a sense, because it's contagious, right? The value that came out of that is that they changed their mindset for every project to now include some type of adoption and change management. The change to add that into a project and allow it to be influential embraces change management in other sectors. If it was a bad experience, you might get a backlash. So it's really important to know, again, the voice of your customer, even when they have that. We've done that already. We've done that too many times, right? It's going to take a process that takes time to improve the maturement of change management within an organization.
Gartner tells us that it's not even the large changes that are impacting our people the most. It's the lots of sequence of little ones that causes the most stress. And look at everything that's happened in the last 18 months. We've had huge amounts of change thrust upon us. We're all tired of it. Oh my God, I'm sick of looking into my monitor at home and my camera and all of this stuff, but that's where I got to be until the office is ready for us all to come back. Not that I want to harp on, all the problems we're all wrestling with through this pandemic, but just to say that there's so much going on with your people, and still we're demanding them to be more productive with less time and wearing more hats, having more responsibility. That all adds up. And if you don't invest in messaging this correctly to your people, having them provide constant feedback, involving them in the process so that they're not just the victims of it, but they're actual contributors to it, it's doing them a disservice. We have to be more proactive about our people, or other companies will be.
Cool.
How do you handle that inherent friction though in some of those incidents, right? There are times when, to use your example of the world we've been in for the last year, right? You took the example of somebody who is anxious to come back into an office, but we know that there are people out there who have embraced the last year and a half, who have sat there and said, I love being at my desk in my home office, at my dining room table, wherever it is. I like being in front of this screen, and I'm not in a hurry to go back into an office. And, there are employers now who are, struggling with trying to get people to come back into an office, and there is an inherent friction there. So how do you, from an organizational change standpoint, how do you find that, and manage that, I guess?
It goes back to, again, listen to the voice of, again, the customer. We were going to have that, Microsoft has that option. They know that some people love to be at home. They're more with their kids now. They've never had this experience before. And there's people like me, like, I need to have people. I need to go inside the office. So it's kind of that the introvert, extrovert kind of person, right? Those folks now have a voice. essentially you have to approach it from a hybrid perspective of the people. The people, it comes first. If there's an opportunity for someone to be more productive, if the keyword is which environment is best for them to be more productive, and focus on that entity. If it showed that for the entire year this person was employed and getting stuff done at home, that's where they're best at it, that's what's comfortable for them. I think forcing people to go into an office to be productive is not the right answer. And that essentially that leadership needs to essentially be innovative within their mind and their policies to be more accepted, to understand, different, I would say different practices, the new way of working. Again, that goes into the age of change, right? We need to kind of embrace a little bit of understanding the pros and cons of a new practice in the organization.
You all might recall when Satya Nadella was talking during Inspire about the paradox of hybrid work, because people want to be at home, but they also want to be there in person. Well, how do you do both? Right? You have to provide options to people. They want to have that engagement with their peers. They want to sit in their pajamas all day. Some days, hey, they're like that. You wake up in the morning, you're just like, I'm going to work from home today. We've all had that. It probably happens most Mondays. But I think the point Eric is trying to get to in this question is, how do you serve paradoxical demands from the end user, and also against the demands that management is making upon its users? And the answer I find is you've got to talk. And it's not a matter of, oh, the CEO calls a town hall and invites everybody to, puts an open mic. You're going to get like a couple people who want to make a speech to the C-level suite speaking, but you're not really going to get the voice of the user. You need to go down to that middle layer of your change agents, your influencers that are in the organization. You need to organize this group. They need to be one of those layers of internal support for technology, but also for change, because they're the ones that people listen to. They're the ones that people talk to. They're the ones that they come to for help, looking for resources. They may not be a manager. They may be just a high performer in some regard, but they're true leaders in the organization. Tapping that group constantly, going to them and understanding from them, what are you hearing on the front line? It's not, should we do a survey? Oh, we'll get probably 1-2% of the answers back, and will that be enough? Maybe not. Maybe a survey, you get 50% response, and that's enough good information. But I find that the informal channel to the real leaders in the organization that aren't leading by title are the ones that can probably provide you with your best solutions, because they're the ones dealing with the friction all the time. Does that make sense, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. It's funny how a lot of these technology things have organic implications, that they deal with people. And so creating a succession plan of leadership is a function of HR, right? What happens if we lose somebody? But creating the level of that change agent, that influencer for technology initiatives creates that level, and then you have it to tap for any additional strategic initiatives that the organization may undertake. And right now, companies are having to pivot so much to achieve their strategic objectives. That group, you need to have them in your pocket and utilize them.
Okay, I'm going to ask one last question and then turn it back over to Manish. And I wish Eddie were here because he has the best questions. I'm going to try and mimic a little bit. So the question we went back and forth in email is, what are the two of you passionate about outside of business?
I think I mentioned this earlier in the cast, but I'll kind of come back to it, which is that I've been involved in various nonprofit organizations as a volunteer, as a board member, and even just training. I love to be out there helping others learn and achieve their potential. So I don't even really care what the subject is sometimes. I just love to be contributing from that standpoint. And I think that that relates to the work that we do also with Seer, which is the transferring knowledge on a mass scale and allowing others to achieve their potential with that knowledge and those skills.
Yeah. I have two passions. One of them outside is to, again, an educator. The reason why I'm going for the PhD is to educate, to be a professor, very short term. I always dreamed to be that. I have a wealth of knowledge that I want to give to the next new leaders in the organization, and hopefully I can be able to influence some of those as they go up in the ranks of their careers. But besides for that, I do like to play pool. I like to the challenge, and yes, I'm a pool shark whenever you want to play. Influencing star players such as Texas Tornado and the Black Widow, those rock stars, but it influenced me to think outside the boxes sometimes of the computer life and have a little life outside on the billiards table.
Awesome. Yeah, we have to do that sometime when you're in California or we come to Vegas, huh? Okay.
Yes, I have a couple places in Gardena we can go to. Gardena Bowl is a great place.
That sounds good. Okay, excellent. Well, we also want to ask you, what does an ideal partnership look like to you?
An ideal partnership looks to us is that we're working, I know it sounds cliche, but really working together on solving whatever the client needs are, desires are. We look to extend that roadmap, to extend that relationship with the client, and making sure that we're bringing value not only to their technology that's being deployed, but also bringing the value overall to inspire the company to grow better and bigger. As a partnership, in my mind, is that we are working cohesively. We're a part of their process, right? We're a part of your success, and vice versa. That's a very strong narrative for me, right? The true meaning of partnership is not just only take. I don't see that, and I've seen that overall, in partnerships in the past.
Yeah.
But our framework is more of bringing consistency on building us up better for the future.
Sounds good. Jason?
I think ideally we would love to have a deeper relationship where we're comfortable with you, you're comfortable with us, and we can actually have a laugh and enjoy each other's company. I mean, human personality is one of the best aspects of life, and we really enjoy joking around with each other, and we'd love to get to that level with you too.
Excellent answer there. So if listeners are more interested in learning about you, connecting with you, how would they contact you?
We have several ways. The first one is to take a look at our site at Seer, SEER solution.com. We do have an About Us page where you can be able to review our profiles and also contact us. You can make an appointment with either myself or Jason on our contact us button. And so we will definitely be eager to talk with you guys, whoever's out there listening.
And if the wind conditions are right, smoke signals work great too.
Absolutely.
Perfect. So that's all for today. So thanks, Jason and Sheila, for time with us. Thank you for sharing your stories with us. That will do it for this episode of True Stories in Tech podcast. I'm Manish Bhardia along with Brian Inuma, President of Strategic Systems Group, Eddie Bader, CEO of Aegis Innovator, Eric Claus, CEO of Partner Source Solutions. Thank you for listening. Please join us next week for more True Stories in Tech.